Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the House of Bloodstein, Mentralysis, Part 2, Chapter 14, The Night of Dead Birds. Welcome to the final chapter in Part 2 of the book, The Immortal. Next week, we will move on to Part 3, which is the final part of the book, and it's called The Chadburn. The Chadburn. What the fuck is that? We will find out next week. This week we have some business to take care of. Last week, Kay, using the ins and outs of his fabled dark sight, saw that shit's gonna get deep real fast there at the end of the hidden surprise. The Jones are gonna weed them out. They're gonna use hypnosis and take over the villagers, arm them with this goddamn Horvath creeper plant and come after him. They're gonna control the weather and send a big ass tornado for him. They don't know where he is specifically. They know he's around someplace, and they're gonna dig him out. He also knows they're gonna lock down the Basnet, and Sarah's feed back from her stasis capsule on HOBM is going to be put to an end, so they will lose a valuable ally in Sarah. So it's just going to be Kay and Laika, and he also saw his gifts getting taken out, and he can't have that. He needs his gifts. If he and Laika are going to somehow survive what's coming, he needs his gifts fully intact. So, recalling that the mad black hat of Wham, Wilhela Corman Grand, invented Whamic Shadow Tech, which is she can actually email you Shadow Tech. Kay's mother, Sigillis of Blanchford, is a Shadow Tech female, just like Wilhela is, and has very potent Silver Tech, which is the good version of Shadow Tech. Very potent, very powerful, but Sig can't email it to Kay. She would have to be there with him, and if she was there, then they would probably skate through this just fine, because Sig is very powerful with her Silver Tech. But she's out of the league. I purposely put her and Captain Davidge and a lot of other allies who might help Kay really far away. They're out of the league. Wilhela's Shadow Tech sent to him via Whamic could be the equalizer, could be what gets him through this night. He has 3 uses of Shadow Tech, and for that he had to pledge his soul to her for 3 years. The ramifications of that will come to haunt him later, but that's a book not yet finished. No, I'm about 40,000 words into it, and I'm doing my standard waffling. I'm changing my mind about things. Anyways, so this one, The Night of Dead Birds, the final chapter in Part 2, is where Kay and his good buddies, the Jones, lock horns in the city of Willem Lester. So, I guess there's nothing to do but proceed with this debacle. Part 2, Chapter 14, The Night of Dead Birds. Let's proceed, shall we? I'm raring to go. Kay gave Laika her Shadow Tech medallion, and she put it on. He took Wilhela's bag and stuffed it into his vest pocket, where it jostled around with his Poltava. He exited the room. Sarah was seated next to the terminal. So what happened? How bad is it? I have to serve Wilhela Corman Grand for 3 Canaan years. Sarah was open-mouthed with shock. Gods, Kay! In exchange for what? Shadow Tech. Why in the name of creation would you want that? Because in a few minutes you're going to be gone, and we are going to be under siege. We need some sort of advantage to counter the Jones' next move. Shadow Tech can provide that. What about your mom with her Silver Tech? What about my mother? I don't see her around anywhere, and she can't whamic it to me through the bloody screen like Wilhela can. Laika stood near Kay with 2 lags drawn, her Shadow Tech talisman gleaming at her throat. Laika will protect Jarl Khan from Black Hat. Sarah glanced at her terminal and was alarmed. Gods, Kay, you were right. There's a surge in network traffic. The Jones are setting off data bombs everywhere. The whole damn net is pinholing. She waved her hand. A green holographic screen appeared, floating on air. This screen will let you control the Monties on the Ultra. Use them if you can. Her image flickered. I'm being squeezed out. She vanished and the cones went out. They surged for a moment and Sarah reappeared in Matrix.
I'll get help.
She flickered again and was gone, including the Monty holograph. Good, Laika cried. Good! Laika glad Sarah gone. A knock came at the door. Laika turned and pointed her legs. Kay sighted through the walls. A male and female wearing in-staff uniforms were standing at the door. They knocked briskly. They were both carrying Horvath creepers in damp earthen pots. Kay loathed the sight of the plant, and if he were able to feel fear, he would certainly be afraid. The creeper. He knew what one whiff of that plant could do to him. It was him and Laika alone, and they needed his gifts operable for as long as possible. Otherwise, this night would be their end. Gods, I'm not using my gifts again. He checked the two over in his sight. It didn't seem like Jones. They weren't armed. They seemed like ordinary staff of the inn. They tried the door, finding it locked. Laika grit her teeth and cocked her legs, ready to blow the two of them away. Battle begins, she said with a bit of high-tath relish. Kay allowed his sight to slip back in time, seeing the two at the door in reverse, regressing back to the afternoon and morning, seeing them in their modest homes with their families, making noisy, splattering breakfast for many noisy Baz kids. He saw them walking to the market, arguing with the merchants over prices, arguing with passers-by in the streets, doing ordinary things Bazzers tended to do. These were just two innocent people caught up under the Jones influence. As it was with his staff, he didn't want to hurt them, if possible. Wait, Laika, don't shoot. He thought fast. Sighting into the next suite over, he found it empty. We're going to waft. Hold still. He put his arms around her and they wafted away with a crash of wind. The adjacent suite was similar to their own, only it was unoccupied. Laika pulled free and aimed her legs at the wall. No, wait a moment. He sighted through the wall. I'd rather not fight these people if we don't have to. Laika peered through the curtains. Many people outside. Many people to fight. Kay continued to sight. Outside, the wind was picking up, and the first waves of rain were beginning to fall, soaking the ground. People milled about, unmindful of the wind and the rain. Dark streaks moved through the clouds in long lines. The future unfurled in many paths, some that were blacked out and impossible to look in on, and others that were plain to see. The plain paths brimmed with defeat. He saw it coming, a devastating blow, the flapping of ancient wings, the flattening of the town, killing many of the inhabitants, and the killing of Laika too, in the rubble of this very inn, and he would be taken and kept partially alive, whisked away across the plain to Gallia Palace, and forced before the enemy, Queen Ghome. And most importantly, he would be forced to look into Sam's face and see evil looking back at him. He would resist, he would refuse, and then she would bargain, offering the lives of his staff and Sam's face in return. Then, like a noble Vith, he would sacrifice himself, give in, let her have the machine, unlocking its defenses and making her the master of past, present, and future. For good or for ill, that's what would be. Things got pretty fuzzy after that. Laika, we've got to get out of here now. The open paths into the future that I can see lead into ruin. The only alternative I can think of is to force ourselves down a path that I can't see. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the smoking bag of shadow tech. First and foremost, we need my gifts. They can take their creepers and be damned. No, Jarl Khan, Laika cried. Bag is evil. I've already paid with 3 years of my life. I intend to make certain those years will be well spent. Now that he had Wilhelm's shadow tech, what was he supposed to do with it? Kay wasn't certain how to use the bag. He tried squeezing it and all it did was smoke heavier. There was a knock at the door. Laika glanced out the window through the curtains. People, Jarl Khan, with plants. Kay was desperate. He couldn't allow his gifts to be lost again so soon. If they were to survive this, with no Sarah and no king to assist them, he had to have his gifts. Take care of them, quietly, incapacitate them, and keep those damn plants away from me. Laika strode into the foyer as Kay struggled with the bag. How was he supposed to use it? How? Wait, Wilhella's mouth mentioned something about throwing it down. He took the bag and cast it to the floor like a beanbag. As it hit, a cloud of soot came out and slowly swirled into the air, lingering near Kay with otherworldly heaviness. Raw shadow tech waiting to be formed. He heard the sounds of a struggle from the foyer. He heard bodies being tossed about and the snap of bones breaking. An earthen pot clattered to the floor and broke. He didn't have much time. Now what? He tried speaking aloud. I need protection from contaminants in the air. I need a respirator and filter of some sort. The sooty cloud of shadow tech instantly, if somewhat methodically, reacted. It formed around him, adhering to his flesh, creating a black, skin-tight suit like that of a diver. The wave of black crept up his legs and waist, moving steadily towards his head like a painted-on layer of hot tar. From the foyer, he heard the crack of a gun and saw muzzle flashes. Laika was shooting. There seemed to be many people in the foyer trying to get past her. A fierce struggle in progress. As the wave of shadow tech approached his neck, it spread out, forming a black bubble around his head. The forming shadow tech seemed to resemble the black spacesuit the terrible dead man of Mayor wore during their battle in the Grove. Perhaps his recollection of it unconsciously shaped the shadow tech. As it formed around him, all the whirling and banging and shooting sounds coming from the foyer were shut out into sudden nothingness. The last thing he heard was the clear ring of a solid sword strike and the cries of people dying. The bubble around his head was black, and he was plunged into pitch, humid darkness. He had a moment of extreme claustrophobia, not being able to hear or see and feeling the hot grip of the shadow tech suit all around him like a smothering straitjacket. He felt as if he were suffocating. Regaining his composure, he sighted through the bubble. Over his shoulder, he saw 2 ribbed tanks form at his back, and a number of organic-looking exhaust tubes twist and intertwine. He looked at his hands. They were sinewy, ribbed, clawed, like the hands of a demented beast turned inside out. A dark pouch formed at his waist. Inside the pouch were his Poltava, his Karg, and his bag of shadow tech ready for 2 more uses. He pulled the Karg out and slung it into a bony saddle. To his shock, the shadow tech wasn't done. Inside the bubble, it formed a hot, flexible appendage that clapped itself to Kay's nose and mouth. Kay resisted, but it throbbed and writhed and forced its way into his mouth, where it went deep down his throat. He gagged. He doubled over, trying to breathe. He was smothering. "Just relax," he heard a voice say. "Let Wilhella take care of you." He forced himself to be calm. He felt air flowing into his lungs. A man appeared through the foyer, torn and bleeding. He was carrying a wilted Horvath creeper. He saw Kay and ran to him with surprising speed. Kay unsaddled his Karg. He met the attacker, slapping the creeper out of his hand. Spores from the plant filled the air in a pervasive yellowy cloud. It coated his suit in a golden dusting and stuck to it. Kay smelt nothing except the primal reek of shadow tech. The suit appeared to be filtering out the dust as planned. An enraged Laika, slick with gore, appeared from the foyer and reached out for the man, her arms stretching. She seized him and slammed his body several times into the floor. Karg in hand, Kay joined her in the foyer. 20 people lay there, some badly injured, some dead, mixed in to a weedy carpet of creepers and loose soil. Laika slammed heavy furniture against the door to brace it. "Many people come, Jarl Khan," she said, her voice coming in as a synthesized whine through his shadow tech bubble. She turned and was surprised, seeing him in the demonic black suit for the first time. She drew her swords. "It's me, Laika. I'm all right. I used the bag to create a hermetic suit to protect me from the creepers. It seems to work. I don't smell them. I have my gifts still." She reached out and tentatively touched the bubble around his head. "Jarl Khan," she asked. "Laika, can you hear me?" She nodded. "Jarl Khan's voice strange," she said. "I'm fine. I created this suit to protect me from the creeper spores. It seems to be working." Kay patted her on the wrists. Don't take off your medallion, whatever you do. This stuff is toxic. She led him to the window, and they peered out into the night. Outside, unmasked Baz winger ships flew through the stormy skies, bathing the streets with spotlights and tongues of red scanning cone energy. Hordes of Bazzers marched about in the wet, wind-driven streets, most carrying drenched creepers in pots, others toting weapons of various kinds. As Kay and Laika watched, a voice came in through his bubble and crawled into his head.
Kay, time to come out.
Kay recognized the voice. Tal Daroga. Outside, the winger ships dropped a steady stream of small bombs all about the city proper. They went off with a muffled woof, distributing a cloud of spore-laden vapor. The Baz winger ships came in and fired lines of missiles into seemingly random areas of the city, battering the iron and brick buildings, destroying people's homes.
Come out, Kay.
More missiles, more explosions.
Kay, come out.
Daroga ordered.
We were hoping you'd follow us to Baz. We figured violating your house and killing some of your staff would get you to come out. Messing with your wife was the final blow, wasn't it? Our leader came up with that idea herself. We needed to get you out of Blanchford. Too much Vith magic floating all around that accursed place. Here, though, you're exposed and alone. And now that we've got you, you're not going anywhere. Of course, you must know by now that she wants the bloody machine of yours. Not the Monoma Phil she's currently wearing on her face. She's wanted it for a long time. And now here it is. We just need to get you to deactivate all those pesky Vith traps around it.
The winger ships cavorted over the city on stilts of scanning energy. They fired missiles to the ground here and there, one of them detonating not far from the inn. Tal Daroga continued.
We know you're somewhere in this city, hiding like a scared rabbit. I suppose we're just going to have to flush you out with H grenadiers. So pardon us while we blow out your window so our hypnosis wave flows through nice and strong.
The winger ships pulled away, and the crowds of people melted into the shadows. Outside became eerily quiet. Laika stood by the windows, her DD drawn. Laika, get away from the windows, Kay said. She came to his side. Get down and stay low. She knelt down and Kay stood over her. A storm's coming in. I see it. The wind outside picked up, howled, and went vertical. A devastating tornado blew in, low to the ground and shapeless, its vortex churning up the earth. The ground shook as it neared. Laika took Kay into her arms and braced herself. It hit in a deafening growl. The windows shattered and were swept away. Loose objects in the suite took flight and were sucked out. Laika was pelted front and back, but held firm as the vortex moved away. The structure of the inn had taken a severe beating and looked ready to come down all around them. Laika was injured. Blood trickled down one of her arms. Laika, you're wounded. Let me have a look. Laika, fine, she said. Daroga's voice came through again.
That should do it. Now for the H-wave. It won't hurt a bit. I promise.
Laika went to the window and gazed out. She was lacerated with several small cuts on her arms. Her composite armor and her rubbery high-tech flesh had warded most of the blows aside. None of her wounds appeared to be serious. The tornado was gone, leaving a massive swath of destruction behind and a momentary path of starry night sky in its wake. There were destroyed buildings all around, fallen masonry and pockets of fire lighting up the cloudy night. Anybody who had been out in that maelstrom was no doubt dead.
Do you hear it, Kay? Our gentle voice? Certainly you do.
Kay heard nothing but the stillness of his confining suit and the beat of his own heart. There was a snide, expectant sort of silence from Daroga, as if he expected to have snared Kay by now. Laika, do you hear the H Grenadiers? Yes, Jarokhan. I can't. The suit is protecting me. In his sight, the night was livid with scanner cones coming down and overlapping from winger ships loitering high above. If he and Laika ventured out and tripped a cone, the information would immediately be relayed to the Jones command center back in Gallia. They were pinned down in the wreckage of their suite. Taldaroga's voice came back on, a bit more flustered this time.
So, you're somehow evading our H-wave, huh? It isn't a problem. Time for round 2, and if you're entertaining the notion that we need you alive, think again. I suppose we're going to have to kill every living thing in this city. We can bring your dead body to our leader and she can reanimate it, no problem. All we need is your damned Vith head. Now for it.
There was a terrible silence and an uneasy pause. A buzz grew in the distance, quickly growing loud. Kay sighted. He saw a number of black, funnel-like shapes descending on the city, snaking through the streets and twisting into alleys with fluid-like movement. He and Laika backed away into the center part of the suite, Laika drawing her lags. Moments later, a mass of flapping wings and calling throats poured in through the windows. Birds, thousands of them of various sizes and species, moving with a singular consciousness, marking their passage with a near-constant rain of droppings and shed feathers. They surged around Kay and Laika. She didn't like them and reacted fiercely, swatting at them with her 6 arms. She drew her giant longswords and flailed away, killing dozens of birds with every stroke. Dead birds covered the floor. Taldaroga's triumphant voice came in.
There you are, Kay. The end of the hidden surprise. I should have guessed. Too bad. I like that place too. Good lunch menu.
Winger ships closed in, power diving from above. Missiles blasted, taking fiery chunks of stone and masonry. The structure of the inn groaned, ready to collapse. Kay had had his fill of Taldaroga and the Jones, and their uncaring immortal leader, Queen Ghome. He glanced at the floor, covered with dead birds. Some common pigeons, others rustic thrushes and rooks, and a few were delicate, colorful birds from the moist forests of Baz, taken from their nests and compelled to die in a ruined inn that was about to be flattened. More dead, left in the Jones' wake. It was time to give the Jones back. It was time to fight. He took his bag of shadow tech from the pouch and threw it down, leaving one use left. He picked the bag up as a wispy cloud of shadow tech came up, awaiting his command. Shadow tech was a wonder. With it, one could create towering monsters, unbreakable weapons, and complex machines. His mother used her silver tech to create her familiar of the Seeker, the old fleet warbird she and Captain Davidge sailed the heavens in before Kay was born. His mother knew nothing of ship design, of stellar mechanics, or engineering. Yet with her silver tech, her tiny Seeker flew in miniature, like a model airship. It banked. It soared, and was utterly deadly when it needed to be. If she could do it, so could he. Thoughts entered his head, and the shadow tech reacted, forming into a hollow bubble resting on the floor just big enough to fit 2 people. He crawled in and pushed himself to one side. "Laika!" he called. "Laika, get in here quick!" She glanced at the small black shadow tech bubble and hesitated. "Laika, hurry!" She dove into the bubble, her giant bulk and weapons filling it in a rubbery mass. Kay reached out and pulled Laika into him, giving her more room. She embraced him tight with her 6 arms, her long hair clotted with bits of dust and plaster. The bubble closed around them, and they were sealed within. There was barely enough room to breathe. Several moments later, point-blank missile shots devastated the suite. Gouts of raging fire erupted, scouring the masonry, cracking the stone, melting iron. The inn came down all around, burying them deep. "Entombed, Jarl Khan," Laika said. The shadow tech bubble seemed to be holding fast, but Laika was right. They were sunk in deep, buried under tons of burning masonry and iron. The tiny bubble they hid in was certainly not what Kay had imagined. He had imagined a great ship, fast and strong, spider-like, and brimming with dark weaponry moving as a juggernaut through the enemy. They waited for what seemed like an eternity. Outside the bubble, fires raged. And then the shadow tech reacted, forming, linking into complex structures at a very slow rate. The bubble expanded and elongated, shifting the masonry around them without effort, like a large animal buried in the sand, pushing its way out. Soon, Kay and Laika could sit apart. Soon they could stand. As they watched, machinery formed around them with effortless, fluid movement. Chairs sprouted out of the floor. Control panels blossomed and became solid. A great window appeared through which they could see the tightly compacted masonry dappled with fire. Kay and Laika stood together, watching the process with wonder and a bit of dread. Lights came up. Systems came online. The black ship around them thrummed with steadily growing power. Laika plopped into the pilot's chair and took in the layout. "Laika, can you fly this?" Kay asked hopefully. "No, not familiar with layout." She took hold of the control sticks. "What ship is this?" I don't know. I just dreamed it up." "Where canards?" "The what?" "I don't know. Do your best," Kay said, sitting next to her. Head on a swivel, Laika memorized the control panels and, using 4 arms, took the sticks and moved them. The ship lurched a little. "Ah!" Laika cried. "Ah!" She moved them again, and the black ship trembled. Masonry shifted and fell aside. They emerged into the damp night.
"What the hell are you playing at, Kay?"
came Talgaroga's thoughts.
"Never mind. Lay into him."
A barrage of missiles came in, exploding in a steady sparkle. The ship yawed a little under the weight of the pounding, but Laika adjusted the sticks and the ship leveled. Kay sighted to assess the damage. Outside of the control room, the ship appeared to be solid shadow tech. The ship seemed to be a partially living thing, resembling more a large organism rather than a piece of machinery. The missiles were having no effect. The shadow tech shell holding fast. "Jones ships!" Laika cried. Kay looked up. A wave of winger ships was coming down fast, ready to launch missiles and bathe them in neurocones. "Weapons!" he cried. "Where are our weapons?" As if in response, up came a screen. It was the Monty control screen Sarah had called up before she was locked out of the network. From that screen, he could commence a surface-to-surface or surface-to-air attack. The screen was rich with targets. He pressed the holographic buttons and selected targets. The screen indicated the Monties had launched and were in flight. Outside, they heard a number of explosions, followed by the dull thud of winger ships falling to the ground. Kay continued selecting targets, launching and eliminating them. Suddenly, the screen went blank. "I think the Jones just took out Sarah's ship," Kay said. "What other weapons do we have? We must have more." Sighting, he saw a number of spidery, stalk-like black tentacles reach out and seize the remaining winger ships on the move, plucking them out of the sky. The tentacles crushed some and ran through others, knocking them about like children's kites. Kay watched with wonder. "Laika, get us moving, west over the wall. We're going to Gallia Palace, and we're bringing a little piece of hell with us." The ship moved smoothly over the city. Kay saw the width of the devastation the Jones had wrought. The city flattened both by the tornado and the Jones ordnance. In his sight, Kay spotted a battalion of battle units waiting just beyond the city perimeter. He saw them scramble into position. A barrage of missiles, rockets, lasers, sonics, and heat came up from the ground, hoping to stop his ship, and he watched with satisfaction as the black Shadowtech tentacles came down and rent them into shapelessness tinged with fire. Jones operators clambered out of the wreckage of their fallen units. The tentacles hesitated, waiting for his orders. Kay hardened his heart, and the Jones were killed. Other Jones took refuge in buildings and under heaps of wreckage, hoping to seek shelter. Kay dug them out and ended their lives. The ship passed over the Gallian wall and entered the openness of the plain. "Storms, Jarl Khan," Laika cried. Ahead, 3 tornadoes of terrible fury dropped out of the clouds and closed in on them. They hit the ship dead on. Kay felt the black vessel shudder. Through the glass, Kay saw nothing but churned earth and debris. Frequent lightning strikes hit the ship, coupled with the continuous thuds of loose objects driven by the wind and striking the hull. The ship appeared to be holding. "How are we?" he asked Laika. "Ship good." She moved the sticks and they continued on, ignoring the pounding maelstrom outside. Instead of slowing, the Shadow Tech ship picked up speed, plowing ahead regardless of what Queen Ghome and the Jones could throw at them. Only the arcane could harm Shadow Tech. How far are we from Gallia Palace? 10.32 miles. As quickly as they had come, the storms died away, leaving in a natural calm. The sky overhead vaulted with turbid clouds. There it was, Gallia Palace, way off in the distance in plain sight, lit up like a pearl. Kay saw something big coming in. Laika, to our right! The ship was slammed by a holocaust of steam. Something outside was blasting the ship with steam, raking it with flashing claws. The attack was having an effect. The ship shuddered hard and lost altitude. Kay fought back, reaching with black tentacles, latching on to whatever was out there, ripping metal scales away. Giant claws tore their way into the hull of the ship. The outer skin was breached. Shadow Tech howled in pain. A blast of steam scalded the ship a second time. The tentacles curled up and dropped off. Systems went down. Shadow Tech screamed and was defeated, blasted away. Laika fought with the controls, but it was no good. The ground came up fast. Laika reached back to protect Kay, and they slammed into the earth, churning it up. The ship crumbled around them. Digging through the ashy wreckage, they climbed out into the night. Something was in the sky, a heavy-bodied black patch, blacker than the darkness around it. Headlights of orange intensity cut the dark before it, like a pair of lances, and a set of small gleaming eyes turned to them with disdain. Victorious, it flapped away, moving through the low-hanging clouds. Kay got his first look at the ship from the outside. It was a horrifying collection of pulsing nodes and coiled tentacles. It looked like some sort of terrifying bug or mollusk that had been pulled from its shell and cooked over a hot fire. It quickly shriveled up and crumbled into soot. Whatever had brought them down was arcane in the extreme to defeat Shadow Tech so easily.
Not bad, Kay,
came Taldaroga's thoughts again.
Didn't think you had it in ya. But as you can see, our leader has an answer for everything.
Laika, how far are we from Gallia Palace? 5.6 miles. Kay looked around, seeing a horde of Jones units moving in their direction. They're coming in. Laika drew her DD. Let Jones come. Wait, Kay cried. I have an idea. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 14 at the Night of Dead Birds, and we also conclude Part 2, The Immortal. As we see, things got pretty barbaric in Willem Lester. Lots of innocent Bazzers were caught up in this. The Jones, being the masters of hypnosis, as we established earlier, took them over, handed them Horvath creeper plants and or weapons, and said, go find this simp that we want to capture. And off they went, and pretty much regardless whether these people lived or died, then they started blowing the town apart. The tornadoes that were showing up were cast by Queen Ghome from afar. She is a Geller, and Gellers can control the weather. I grew up in Xenia, Ohio, and in 1978 or 77, there was the Great Xenia Tornado, a massive F5 that rolled through the town, pretty much wiped it out. And to this day, the old timers still get worked up when the sky turns dark. Giant tornado would come back and finish what it started. And tornadoes have always had a special kind of fear for me. I always found them very disquieting to look at, and the destruction that they cause, so I couldn't help throwing them in. Kay figured out how to use the bag of Shadow Tech given to him by Wilhela Corman Grand. And if you look at the cover that you see at the beginning of all the readings, you see this weird black figure in black. That is Kay wearing his Shadow Tech suit to protect him from the creeper spores primarily. It's hot and claustrophobic in there, but better than losing his gifts. And then he made a creepy Shadow Tech ship, and I kind of based it off of the Shadow ships from Babylon 5. I always used to like them. I thought they looked pretty cool. Make something similar of Shadow Tech. And usually you can't damage Shadow Tech unless you out-trump it. If you have something that's more arcane than the Shadow Tech that you're dealing with is, really can't do anything about it. Only a black hat or a sister can dispel Shadow Tech. And something attacked the ship and tore it apart, and they saw it in the sky, kind of bobbing there in the darkness, like a patch of more darkness. That is the Bauer chest. Going forward, the device that holds Queen Ghome's treasures, and we'll be seeing more of that later on. But the Bower chest is incredibly powerful, and it took out Kay's Shadowtech machine with apparent ease, and now they are stranded in Gallia Palace, and the Jones are moving in. Things are looking a little rough for our heroes, and we'll see what happens. Next week, we begin part 3 of the book, the final part called The Chadburn. And the very first chapter in the Chadburn is through the Gellertron. And we'll see how all this mess culminates. It's not looking good for Kay and Laika at the moment. That's next week. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.